You know how it goes. When a huge, 9-figure community project fails to get funding, the blame game starts almost immediately. But what if all that political finger-pointing is actually missing the real story? Today, we're digging into an analysis from Shasta Unfiltered that asks a simple question. Was a $150 million grant killed by politics, or was the plan itself just flawed from the start?
Okay, so this quote really gets right to the heart of the article. It's setting up a major showdown between a political story and the state's actual funding data. The whole idea here is that the real truth isn't in the heated debates or the headlines. It's buried in the spreadsheets.
So you've got two completely different stories here. In one corner, you have political challenger Erin Resner. She's basically saying her opponent, Supervisor Kevin Crye, and the Board of Supervisors totally sabotaged the True North grant. But in the other corner, the article says, hold on a second, the numbers just don't back that up. And that's the core conflict we're going to unpack.
All right, so to start picking this apart, we've got to look at a piece of evidence that, right off the bat, makes that simple story of political sabotage a lot more complicated.
And this is where things get really, really interesting. Turns out, in the very same funding round that said no to the massive True North project, the state turned around and gave a big yes to another project from the exact same county. And we are not talking about a small chunk of change here. We're talking nearly $25 million that went to the Family Dynamics Resource Center in Anderson. That's a huge win, and it seems to completely contradict the idea that local politics were somehow poisoning the well for every single applicant from Shasta County. And here is the real kicker. This project, which is going to create dozens of new beds for kids and teens, got all that funding without a letter of support or any special endorsement from the Board of Supervisors. There was no political drama, no big fight, just a solid application that ticked the state's boxes.
So that really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If one project could get millions of dollars without the board's explicit backing, it kind of suggests the board wasn't this all-powerful gatekeeper everyone made them out to be. So what really happened? Let's dig into why True North actually failed, according to the analysis.
The article basically boils it down to 3 big reasons, all based on the state's funding patterns and the details of the proposal itself. And, well, they have nothing to do with so-called political theater. Okay, first and foremost, the sheer size of this thing was a problem. The True North proposal was asking for a staggering $150 million in state bonds for just one massive campus. And the context here is absolutely everything. That $150 million ask was just way, way beyond the average award, which was sitting around $18 million. It was actually bigger than the single largest award given out in the entire state. The data suggests the state would much rather sprinkle its money across dozens of smaller projects than put all its eggs in one giant basket. All right. Then there's the second major red flag the article points to. The company that was chosen to actually run the facility, Signature Healthcare Services. And this wasn't just some minor detail. It was a huge potential liability. According to a big investigation by the San Francisco Chronicle, facilities run by Signature have faced some incredibly serious accusations. Now, you got to put yourself in the shoes of a state grant evaluator. You're responsible for taxpayer money. Seeing a track record like this, well, that's a massive risk, no matter what any local politician thinks. And finally, the third reason really just comes down to a fundamental mismatch. When you look at who actually got the money, a really clear pattern starts to emerge about what the state was actually looking for.
You know, the state clearly had a type. They were funding nonprofits, counties, and tribal applicants. They liked smaller, more focused projects. But the True North proposal? It was enormous. It relied on a for-profit operator with a pretty spotty record, and it was already a source of local controversy. It just didn't fit the mold of what a winning application looked like.
But wait, the story doesn't stop there. The article also follows the money and takes a look at the finances of the organization that was actually behind the grant proposal, the Children's Legacy Center. This adds a whole other layer to the picture. It turns out the effort to just create the True North proposal helped lead to a pretty big operating deficit for the CLC, over $2 million, which they had to cover with reserves. Now, at the same time, public documents show the organization's CEO makes over $224,000 a year. And that total executive pay makes up about a quarter of all wages, a figure the article notes is high for similar nonprofits. So after looking at the successful grant, the state's funding patterns, and the nitty-gritty details of the proposal, we can kind of pull all these threads together for the article's final take. And this lays it all out, doesn't it? You have the political story, which blames obstruction. And then you have the data-driven story, which points to these fundamental flaws that probably made the proposal a long shot from the very beginning. The funny thing is, the state's final decision seems to actually prove the very questions the supervisor was asking all along.
At the end of the day, this whole situation leaves us with a really critical question, one that goes way beyond this one county. When things fall apart, it's so easy to just focus on the political drama. But maybe the most important and useful place to look for answers is right there in the fine print of the proposal itself.
And that's our breakdown of this really complex issue. All of the information and the analysis we've gone through today comes directly from the fantastic reporting of Shasta Unfiltered. Thanks so much for joining us.